My son texted me, "Don't call or come over, we're done." I just stared at the screen for a few seconds, my hands trembling, but my heart strangely calm. After everything I'd done for him, this was how he wanted to end things, through a text message. I replied with a simple okay, no anger, no questions, just silence. But that night, as the clock struck midnight, my phone began to ring again and again, 75 missed calls, desperate messages, and one final voicemail that would change everything forever. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to Extreme Revenge for more powerful and emotional real-life stories like this one. And don't forget to comment your country's name below. I'd love to know where you're watching from. My name is Lawrence Pierce, and I used to believe that family meant everything. I wasn't a perfect man, but I built my life around loyalty, hard work, and love, the kind of values I thought would carry through to my only son, Ethan. But sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who break you in ways no stranger ever could. I live just outside Austin, Texas, in a quiet neighborhood lined with oak trees and houses that all look the same from the outside. My home, though modest, carried memories worth more than gold to me. Every inch of it still echoed with the laughter of my late wife, Margaret. She passed away 5 years ago, leaving behind her warmth and a fortune most people couldn't imagine. See, no one, not even Ethan, knew who I really was. To him, I was just his aging father, retired, living off savings, and spending my time fixing things around the house. But behind the humble clothes and dusty pickup truck, he was the silent founder of Pierce Logistics Group, one of the largest private freight companies in Texas, operating under a corporate veil that concealed my name. I'd always believed that humility was a greater strength than pride, but I was about to learn that humility could also be mistaken for weakness. Ethan was everything I once wanted him to be. Ambitious, educated, full of fire. He graduated from law school in Houston, married a doctor named Sophie, and together they built a life of comfort. But somewhere along the way, he began to drift, not just from me, but from the person I raised him to be. I used to call him every weekend, bring over homemade chili, or offer help fixing up his yard. At first he'd answer, sometimes even thank me. But then the tone changed. The conversation shortened. The excuses began. "We're busy, not this weekend, maybe next time." Until one day the messages stopped altogether. Then came the text. It was a quiet Thursday evening. I had just finished dinner, leftover pot roast and a cold beer, when my phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with Ethan's name. I smiled instinctively, thinking maybe he finally wanted to talk, but when I opened the message, my heart froze. "Don't call or come over, we're done." That was it. No explanation, no goodbye, just those few words that hit harder than any slap could. I sat there for a long time, staring at the glow of the screen in the dim light of the kitchen. My hands shook, not with anger, but with heartbreak. After a moment, I typed a single word in reply. "Okay." I set the phone down, turned off the light and went to bed. But sleep never came. All night, I replayed every moment. The times I drove 2 hours to babysit their son. The money I slipped into Ethan's account when he was struggling. The sacrifices I made so he'd never have to live the life of hardship I once did. I thought I was building bridges, but somehow I had built walls instead. The next morning I packed a small suitcase. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to leave. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. I spent the next few days driving. Through Waco, Dallas, and into the outskirts of Denver, I let the open road clear my head. The mountains always had a way of humbling me, reminding me that even the biggest wounds could heal if you just gave them time. 3 days later, I checked into a quiet inn near Boulder, using only my first name. The manager didn't know me as the CEO of Pierce Logistics. To him, I was just another traveler looking for peace. That anonymity gave me comfort. It felt like I was finally free from expectations. Meanwhile, back in Austin, my silence had started to echo louder than my presence ever had. It wasn't until a week later that one of my oldest friends, Charles Whitman, called me. Charles was a retired banker who'd known me since my first startup days, one of the few who knew the truth about my wealth. "Lawrence," he said, his tone low, "I ran into Ethan at a gala in Houston last night." I sighed, leaning back on the hotel bed. "And how is he?" "Confused," Charles replied. "He mentioned you two had a falling out. Then he asked what I was up to these days. I told him I'd been consulting for Pierce Logistics Group." There was silence on both ends of the line. Charles continued, "Lawrence," the look on his face, he had no idea. "He asked if I meant Pierce, as in your Pierce." I told him yes. I didn't think it was a secret. A slow smile formed on my lips, not out of pride, but out of the cruel irony of it all. Charles hesitated. "I think he's finally realized who you really are." He looked devastated. "Good," I said quietly. "Maybe now he'll start to understand what he turned his back on." After hanging up, I stared out the window at the fading sunset. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel dismissed or unwanted. I felt in control. That night I made a decision, not out of vengeance, but out of justice. My son wanted to cut ties, so I would give him exactly what he wanted, and make him live with the weight of it. I called my attorney in Houston, Maria Ellis, and arranged for a transfer of assets. Silent, discreet, irreversible. Within days, my properties, accounts, and holdings were secured under a new trust. Ethan's name was removed from everything, including the inheritance he once took for granted. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was teaching a lesson, one that could only be learned when the world stopped cushioning you. 2 nights later, just past midnight, my phone lit up, 75 missed calls, dozens of messages, and 1 voicemail, the kind that chills your blood before you even press play. I took a deep breath and pressed it. Ethan's voice came through, frantic, trembling, broken. "Dad, please, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Sophie's in the hospital. We lost everything. Please call me back. I'm sorry, just please." My eyes stung with tears, but I didn't move. Not yet, because sometimes silence is the only answer that speaks loud enough to be heard. The sound of Ethan's voice haunted me long after the voicemail ended. I replayed it twice, once to confirm what I heard, and again to burn it into memory. The same son who had told me I was done was now broken, desperate, begging for help. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same Lawrence Pierce who used to rush to fix his problems. I'd given him everything once, and all it did was feed his arrogance. Now the silence he once demanded had become my answer. Still, I couldn't ignore the questions swirling in my head. What happened to Sophie? What did they lose? I wasn't cruel, just hurt beyond repair. Revenge for me was never about destroying someone. It was about revealing the truth they refused to see. By morning, I received another message, this time from my old attorney, Maria Ellis. "Ethan came to my office today, looked panicked. He demanded to know if you still had ownership of Pierce Logistics. I told him the company's trust structure was sealed. He left speechless. I stared at her message and felt a faint ache in my chest. The truth was beginning to crush him. For years, I'd hidden my empire not to deceive him, but to protect him from becoming entitled. When Margaret died, she left me her half of the fortune, and I made a silent vow that our son would earn his place, not inherit it. But he didn't see that as love. He saw it as rejection. Later that afternoon, I sat by the window of the small inn near Boulder, coffee in hand, staring at the falling snow. The quiet hum of the heater filled the silence. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't answer, but a voicemail followed. "Mr. Pierce, this is Officer Daniels from the Austin Police Department. We need to confirm your welfare. Your son reported you missing. Please return this call." I smiled faintly. So now he cares if I'm alive. I dialed back, spoke briefly, and assured the officer I was fine, just taking time away from family matters. When the call ended, I sat there, letting the irony wash over me. The son who erased me from his life was now calling the police because I'd gone silent. That evening, I decided to drive back to Texas, not to forgive, not to reconcile, but to finish what I'd started. Revenge, after all, wasn't complete until the lesson sank deep enough to change a man's soul. By the time I reached Austin, it was past midnight. The familiar skyline glowed faintly under a layer of fog. I parked a few blocks from my old home, the one I had quietly transferred out of my name. It now legally belonged to a charitable trust. My son didn't know that yet, but he soon would. The lights inside the house were on. I could see Ethan pacing near the window, phone in hand, talking to someone, probably Sophie. Even from a distance, I could sense the tension. Their perfect suburban life was cracking piece by piece. I stayed in the car for a while, thinking of Margaret. She always said, if he ever forgets who raised him, life will remind him. I guess this was life's way of keeping her promise. The next morning, I called Charles. I'm back, I said. Lawrence, he's been asking everyone about you. He came by my office, desperate. I told him you were fine but needed space. He looked destroyed. Good, I said calmly. Let him sit with it. Charles hesitated. He's not the same kid anymore, Lawrence. He's arrogant. Sophie influences him. Everything's about appearances and control. If you're planning something, make sure it's worth the pain. Oh, it'll be worth it, I murmured. 3 days later, I invited Charles and Maria to meet at a private estate I owned near Lake Travis, one of the few properties I'd never shown my family. It was secluded, surrounded by oak trees and water that shimmered in the Texas sun. This is where it begins, I told them. Maria raised an eyebrow. You're going to war with your own son? I shook my head. No, I'm teaching him what it means to lose everything he took for granted, not through cruelty, but through consequence. I showed them documents, transfer deeds, asset listings, trust accounts. Over the last week, I had quietly shifted Pierce, logistics controlling shares into a new charitable foundation, the Margaret Pierce Trust. The Trust's mission funding education for single mothers across Texas. Ethan's name was nowhere to be found. He'll find out soon, Maria said softly. I want him to, I replied. And when he does, I want him to understand that money can be rebuilt, but respect, once lost, is gone forever. Later that week, Ethan finally tracked me down. It was late evening when he appeared at the gates of the Lake Travis property, headlights sweeping across the gravel driveway. I was sitting on the porch, sipping tea as the crickets sang in the distance. He stepped out of the car, wearing an expensive suit, but his face looked worn, the kind of exhaustion that comes from regret, Dad, he said quietly, walking up the steps. You're alive. I was never gone, I said evenly. You just stopped looking. He looked down, guilt written all over his face. I messed up. I shouldn't have sent that message. Sophie and we were fighting. Money was tight. I said things I didn't mean. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. You didn't just send words, Ethan. You sent a message, and it was received. He sighed, his voice cracking. I didn't know about the company, Dad. Pierce Logistics, your company. Charles told me. I thought you were just an old man with no plans left. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what I wanted you to think. Why? He asked, desperate. Because I needed to see who you were without the money, I said quietly. Turns out I didn't like what I saw. Ethan sat down on the steps, head in his hands. Sophie's gone, he whispered. She left. Said she didn't want to be with a man who couldn't provide. We lost the house, the cars, everything. I looked away, my chest tightening. You still have your pride, I said softly. That should keep you warm. He didn't answer. Only silence filled the air, heavy and fragile. I stood up, walked inside, and returned with an envelope. Here, I said. This is what you wanted when you told me we were done. He frowned and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal notice. It read, effective immediately, all financial support and inheritance previously designated to Ethan Pierce are revoked. In lieu, donations have been made to the Margaret Pierce Trust to honor integrity and compassion, virtues his father once hoped to see in him. Ethan's hands trembled. Dad, you can't mean this. I do, I said calmly. This isn't punishment. It's the end of pretending. He stood up, eyes wet, voice shaking. Please, I'll change. Just give me a chance. I looked at him. I really looked at him. For a second, I saw my boy again, the little kid who used to run into my arms after school. But the man standing before me wasn't that boy anymore. He was someone who'd forgotten what love without condition looked like. "You'll change," I said quietly, "but not because of me. You'll change when life makes you earn what you once demanded." I turned, walked inside, and closed the door. Behind me, I could still hear him whisper through tears, "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry," but I didn't turn back. Not this time. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Ethan's voice echoed in my head, trembling, broken, filled with regret. I'd wanted him to feel the sting of consequence, but not the collapse of his soul. Yet I couldn't stop now. If I softened too early, the lesson would vanish like smoke. The next morning, I stood at the edge of the property, watching the sunrise spread over Lake Travis. The reflection shimmered on the water like fire. It reminded me that even the calmest surfaces can hide deep burns underneath. My phone buzzed again. It was Charles. "Lawrence," he said cautiously, "your son's at the firm. He's asking to see you." "I'm not available," I said flatly. "He's saying he'll do anything. He wants to make amends." "Tell him," I replied, "some debts can't be repaid with words." Charles sighed. "You're really going through with this, aren't you?" "Yes," I said. "He burned the bridge. I'm just letting the ashes cool." That afternoon, I met with my board of trustees at the Margaret Pierce Foundation, the organization that now controlled every cent of my empire. They were surprised to see me personally involved, as I usually kept operations discreet. "We'll allocate the first round of scholarships to Austin community colleges," I said. "Focus on single parents returning to education. Make sure the message is clear. Compassion builds futures." Maria smiled faintly. "That sounds like something Margaret would have said." I nodded. "It's also something Ethan should have learned." The board approved the plans, and the foundation's official launch date was set for 2 weeks later. Local media had already picked up whispers that Pierce Logistics had been sold to a mysterious charitable entity. They didn't know it was still me, operating behind the scenes. That secrecy was my weapon. 2 days later, Ethan showed up at my hotel in downtown Austin. I was having lunch in the lobby when I saw him through the glass doors. He looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. He approached my table cautiously. "Dad, please." "Just 5 minutes." I gestured for him to sit. He took a deep breath. "I talked to Maria. She told me about the foundation, about the money." "I didn't know you'd do that." "Why shouldn't I?" I asked calmly. "It's my legacy, not your entitlement." "I know," he said softly, "and I deserve everything that's happened. But Sophie's gone, Dad. She cleaned out our joint account. Left a note saying she can't live like this anymore. I'd lost my job last week because I couldn't focus. I've got nothing left." I set my coffee down. "Then maybe it's time you start over, from nothing, like I once did." He looked at me, eyes raw with emotion. "You built everything from scratch, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. "Every dollar, every brick, every opportunity, earned. You thought it came easy because you never saw the struggle. I hid the hard parts to protect you. But that was my mistake. I should have let you see how hard life hits when you take it for granted." He wiped his face. "I wish I'd understood sooner." "You still can," I said, standing up. "If you truly want redemption, prove it. Not by asking for help, but by earning it." He frowned. "How?" "You're a lawyer," I said. "Find a cause. Defend someone who can't afford you. Give the world the part of you that doesn't chase wealth. Only then will you know what legacy means." He nodded slowly, tears welling up. "I'll try, Dad." I turned to leave, but before walking away, I added quietly, "Don't try, do it." That's the difference between us. Weeks passed. I didn't hear from him again, not directly. But his name began to circulate in places I didn't expect. Maria called one morning, sounding almost amused. "You won't believe this, Lawrence. Ethan's representing a pro bono case. A single mother fighting a hospital for wrongful dismissal. He's actually doing good work." I paused, processing the words. "He's helping someone?" "Yes," she said. "And he's winning people's respect. Quietly but sincerely. It's like he's changing. For the first time in years, I felt something like pride stir in my chest. Not because he was succeeding, but because he was finally becoming the man I'd hoped he could be. Still, I stayed silent. The distance between us had become part of the lesson, and I needed to be sure it wasn't temporary guilt guiding him. A month later, I attended the Foundation's first scholarship ceremony at the University of Texas at Austin. The auditorium was full, journalists snapping photos, students clapping as we announced the grants. As I stepped onto the stage to give my speech, I froze for a moment, because sitting quietly in the back row was Ethan. He wasn't dressed like a lawyer, no designer suit, no pretense. Just a simple shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands clasped. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to listen. I continued my speech anyway. "This foundation isn't built on wealth," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. "It's built on what wealth should mean, the power to change someone's life for the better. My late wife believed that true success isn't measured by what you keep, but by what you give away." When the applause faded, I glanced back at him. His eyes were red, not from pride, but from realization. The kind that cuts deep. After the event, I walked to the parking lot. He followed at a distance, unsure if he should approach. Finally, I turned and called out, "You can say it, Ethan." He hesitated, then walked up slowly. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "Probably not," I said softly. "But you can still earn respect." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You were right about Sophie. About money. About everything. I thought you were old-fashioned, bitter. But now I get it. You weren't punishing me. You were protecting me from becoming like her." I smiled faintly. "Took you long enough," he chuckled weakly. "Guess the law didn't teach me that kind of logic." "Life always does," I replied. He exhaled, then said quietly, "Dad, I don't want your money. I just want another chance to be your son." I paused, feeling Margaret's voice whispering somewhere in the back of my mind. "Don't let pride bury love." I reached out my hand. "Then start by earning that title again." He took it, gripping tightly, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a transaction. It felt real, that night as I sat by the lake again, watching the moon ripple across the dark water. I realized my revenge was complete, not because I destroyed him, but because I broke the arrogance that once ruled him, and in its place, a man had been rebuilt. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The air outside my cabin near Lake Travis was crisp, carrying the faint scent of cedar and earth after a night of light rain. For the first time in months, the tension in my chest had eased. Ethan's words still echoed in my mind. "I just want another chance to be your son." I brewed my coffee and sat on the porch, watching a family of ducks glide across the lake. I smiled faintly, something I hadn't done in a long while. Maybe, I thought, this was what Margaret had wanted all along, not a perfect family, but a forgiving one. Just as I was about to head inside, my phone buzzed with a message from Charles. "Lawrence, we might have a problem." "Call me." I frowned and dialed immediately. Charles answered on the first ring, his voice tense. "Morning, Lawrence. I didn't want to bother you, but I think you should know. Someone's been digging into the Foundation's financial filings. They've traced some of the holding companies back to you." "Who?" I asked, my tone turning cold. "A reporter. Claims she's doing an exposé on hidden billionaires, funding non-profits. She called this morning asking if you'd comment on your involvement in Pierce Logistics." I exhaled slowly. "Let her call me directly." "That's not all," Charles continued. "Someone also contacted the Foundation pretending to be you. Tried to authorize a wire transfer of $5 million to an offshore account. My blood ran cold." "What?" "We caught it in time," he said quickly. "Maria flagged it. The signature was forged. But whoever did it had insider knowledge. Access to old company details, codes, even the blind trust documents." I stood up sharply. "That means they had access to Ethan's firm records," I said. "When we liquidated Pierce Logistics, the closing documents went through him. You think—" "No," I interrupted. "Not Ethan, but someone close to him, Sophie." By noon I was on the highway heading back into Austin, my mind racing. When I reached Ethan's apartment building in Barton Hills, the door was half open. I stepped inside cautiously. Ethan was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. The place was a mess. Half-packed boxes, scattered papers, and the faint smell of burned coffee lingering in the air. "She's gone," he said quietly without looking up. "I know," I replied. "Charles told me someone tried to steal money from the foundation. I'm guessing she's behind it," he nodded slowly. "She took my laptop. My client files, everything. Said she needed a new start." I didn't realize what that meant until I saw the email alerts. I sat down across from him. "Do you still have her phone number?" "She blocked me," he said bitterly. "But she called from a new number last night, left a voicemail." He grabbed his phone and played the message. "Ethan, you brought this on yourself. You and your precious father think you can cut me off, humiliate me, and walk away with everything. Well, guess what? I learned a few things living under your roof. You should have kept your secrets locked tighter." Her voice was sharp, confident, almost venomous. Ethan looked up, defeated. "Dad, I think she's planning to leak everything. Your name, the shell companies, the foundation connections. She wants to destroy what you've built." I exhaled. "Then she's already made her biggest mistake. Over the next few days, I worked quietly with Charles and a private cybersecurity firm to contain the damage. We traced Sophie's digital trail through encrypted emails and proxy accounts. She was smart, but not smarter than me. She'd always underestimated my reach. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to hold his law firm together. He was working longer hours, refusing to take money from me, even though I offered. "If I'm going to earn your respect, I can't depend on your fortune," he told me one night. That sentence, "earn your respect," hit harder than any apology. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was growth, but Sophie wasn't finished. 3 nights later, around midnight, my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Dad," he said urgently, "she just posted something online. A thread about billionaire fathers hiding fortunes through fake charities. She tagged journalists, politicians. She's spreading everything." I sat up straight. "Did she use my name?" "Yes, full name. Photos of the house, even our old family pictures." My hand clenched around the phone. "Where is she?" "She's at the airport," he said. "A friend texted me. She's flying out of Dallas tonight." "Stay where you are," I said, grabbing my keys. "I'll handle this." The drive from Austin to Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport felt endless. Every mile carried the weight of every decision I'd made, every silence, every test, every calculated lesson. I had built an empire that could crush competitors in courtrooms, yet here I was, chasing redemption through chaos. When I arrived, the terminal was packed, lights reflecting off polished floors. I spotted her instantly, standing near the check-in counter, phone pressed to her ear, wearing that same arrogance I once saw in my own reflection. I walked up quietly. She turned and froze. "Lawrence," she said, her smirk fading, "leaving already?" I asked. She lifted her chin. "You can't stop me. The world deserves to know who you really are. A manipulative old man hiding billions while pretending to be generous." I smiled faintly. "And what will you gain, Sophie? A few clicks, sympathy? You think anyone will believe the woman who forged a wire transfer and fled her husband's home?" Her eyes flickered with fear. "You can't prove that." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "The digital trail says otherwise. You left fingerprints on every fraudulent document. My attorneys have already filed charges under federal law. You won't be boarding any flight today." She paled. "You wouldn't?" "Oh, but I would," I said. "Because I don't destroy people. I let their actions do that for me." She glared, trembling. "You're a monster." "No," I said calmly. "I'm a father who finally stopped protecting the wrong people." Just then, security officers approached. One of them gestured towards Sophie. "Ma'am, we need to ask you to come with us." As they escorted her away, she looked back at me, hatred burning in her eyes. I didn't flinch. Justice, at last, was in motion. When I returned to Austin the next morning, Ethan was waiting outside my cabin. The lake shimmered behind him under the early sunlight. Did she? "She's facing charges," I said. "Wire fraud, identity theft, defamation. It'll take years for her to untangle herself." He looked down, nodding slowly. "I can't believe she did all that. I thought she loved me. She loved the comfort, not the connection," I said softly. "But you're free now, Ethan, completely." He exhaled shakily. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, I replied. Just learn. Pain's the best teacher, he smiled faintly. Maybe one day I'll have a story like yours to tell. Just make sure it has a better ending, I said, patting his shoulder. That night I sat again by the lake, the reflection of the moon rippling across the surface. For the first time in years, my mind was clear. My revenge hadn't come from wealth or punishment. It came from silence, from letting time and truth reveal what words never could. Somewhere deep down, I knew Margaret was watching, and this time maybe she was finally proud. A week had passed since Sophie's arrest, and peace had returned to my quiet life by Lake Travis. The air was cooler now, the first hints of autumn dancing through the trees. I'd almost forgotten what peace felt like. Each morning, I brewed. My coffee, sat on the porch and watched the sunrise, something I used to do with Margaret. The stillness reminded me that sometimes revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about reclaiming the calm they tried to steal from you. Ethan began visiting often. The first few times he'd show up with coffee and that awkward half-smile, unsure if I really wanted him there. But every visit, every conversation stitched a little more of our broken bond back together. He told me he was starting a new firm, one focused on pro bono work for veterans and single parents, people who couldn't afford representation. It's time I used what I know for something better, he said. I nodded, proud yet silent. Actions spoke louder than apologies. One evening, we sat by the lake together, watching the orange sky melt into deep blue. He finally broke the silence. Dad, I've been thinking. Maybe I was so obsessed with proving myself that I forgot who I was trying to prove it to. You were trying to prove it to me, I said softly. And that's okay. Sons do that. I just wish I'd been wise enough to tell you that you didn't have to. Ethan looked away, his jaw trembling slightly. Do you think Mom would be disappointed? No, I said, she'd be happy. She always believed you'd find your way back, not to me, but to yourself. He smiled faintly. You sound like her. I try to, I replied, sipping my coffee. When you get older, you realize the best revenge isn't getting even. It's living better, without hate. A few weeks later, Charles called again. Lawrence, the foundation's receiving an offer. A corporate group wants to buy the controlling shares of Pierce Holdings. They're offering 3 times its market value. I hesitated. They want to own it outright? Yes, Charles said. Total control. You'd walk away a far richer man, officially this time. I stared out at the lake, the reflection of the trees shimmering on the surface. For years, money had been my weapon, my shield, my silent power. But now, it felt heavy, unnecessary. Reject the offer, I said quietly. Charles paused. You sure? Positive, I said. Donate the majority shares to the foundation. Let it run for the next generation. Maybe Ethan can oversee it someday. I built this empire to protect what mattered. I don't need to own it to do that anymore. And when I hung up, I felt lighter. For the first time in decades, I wasn't protecting an image. I was protecting peace. That night, Ethan came by again. He brought an envelope. What's this? I asked. Something I've been working on, he said. A new legal trust for the Pierce Foundation. I want to make sure no one can ever misuse what you built. I opened it. It was perfect, airtight, ethical and forward-looking. The kind of work that would make any father proud. You've done well, son, I said. Better than I ever did. Ethan looked at me, his eyes glassy. No, Dad. I just learned from the best. We both sat there in silence for a while. The cicadas hummed in the background, the stars shimmered above the lake, and a gentle wind rustled through the trees. Then Ethan turned and asked, Do you ever regret replying okay to my message that night? I smiled faintly. No, son. That okay saved us both. He laughed softly. Yeah, I guess it did. I stood up, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, Just promise me one thing. If you ever have a son, never let silence be your loudest word. He nodded slowly. I promise. Months passed. The foundation flourished under Ethan's guidance. The scandal with Sophie disappeared from headlines as quickly as it had come. People moved on. Life moved forward, as it always does. Every Thanksgiving, Ethan would come over with his kids, and we'd sit by the fire, sharing stories and laughter. The pain of the past became just that, the past. I had lost my wife, almost lost my son, and nearly drowned in my own pride. But revenge, real revenge, wasn't about punishment. It was about peace, the kind that makes you smile without bitterness when you look back. As I watched Ethan helping his children roast marshmallows by the fire that evening, I whispered to myself, "Margaret." He found his way home. And with that, I leaned back in my chair, the warmth of the flames reflecting in my eyes, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: complete peace.